Comedy would be very different nowadays were it not for the impact of Saturday Night Live. Most noteworthy comedy stars of the last 4 decades emerged from their ranks, and nearly 50 years after its premiere, it remains as vital as ever. Yet the making of the show itself has become an almost mythological comedy tale, with it a known fact that the young Lorne Michaels had to overcome overwhelming odds just to get the show made in the first place. So in Jason Reitman's Saturday Night, we basically get a glimpse into the 90 minutes before the live airing of the first ever episode of Saturday Night Live, as Michaels, played by Gabriella Bell, desperately tries to keep NBC from pulling the plug while dealing with a cast, writers, and crew that are in open rebellion. So what Saturday Night does is that it distills most of the big challenges Michaels had to overcome into one 90-minute period. It's conceit that initially overwhelms the audience by throwing us right into the hectic mix, making this easily Reitman's most propulsive film to date. While it's initially a lot to take in, something interesting happens after about 20 minutes. Like Michaels himself, you, as part of the audience, start to thrive on the chaos behind the scenes. Yet, it should be noted that Reitman and co-screenwriter Gil Keenan assume viewers have more than a little familiarity with the history behind the show. They don't stop to explain who guys like Michael O'Donoghue, Tom Davis, and Al Franken are. Basically, they assume that you already know. All this makes Saturday Night a movie that's defiantly for fans of the show, with it almost playing like an adaptation of James Andrew Miller's and Tom Shale's oral history live from New York, albeit with all the chaos of the first part of the book taking place in just a shade over 90 minutes. What's impressive is how effortlessly Reitman manages to cover a lot of ground despite not having much time. It helps that he's assembled a superb young cast who are cast, of course, more for their ability to channel the energy and vibe of certain SNL folks rather than physical resemblance. Some of the performances are incredibly effective, with Dylan O'Brien a standout as Dan Aykroyd, who seemed like he was an unlikely ladies' man behind the scenes, carrying out a dalliance with Rosie Schuster, played by Shiva Baby's Rachel Sennett, who was a writer on the show and married to Michaels at the time. Much of the drama revolves around the two biggest stars to emerge, Chevy Chase and John Belushi. The two are shown to be at each other's throats, with Belushi a mercurial figure who resents being given any direction at all and refuses to sign his contract. It's the movie's depiction of Belushi as played by Matt Wood, which may prove to be the most controversial, as he comes off as a bit of a drug-addled nightmare and a baby, with his comedy genius not really being conveyed. There are so many stories of Belushi's hell-raising that often folks forget just how funny he really was. However, the movie is very effective in depicting Chevy Chase's rise behind the scenes, with NBC execs loving this handsome charmer, with Willem Dafoe's David Tebbutt, a higher-up at NBC, telling him, "You're a handsome, funny Gentile, and that counts for something." Back in 1975, that was probably true, and Corey Michael Smith plays him as increasingly cocky, albeit still a team player at this point. He has a great scene where he fights with a visiting Milton Berle, played by J.K. Simmons in a really great cameo, and gets a glimpse of what his future might be, for better or for worse, and knowing a lot about Chevy Chase nowadays, can't help but feel like he's kind of looking into his future. Despite it depicting so many legends behind the scenes, the film does keep its focus squarely on Lorne Michaels, with the Fabelman's breakout Gabriella Bell expertly catching both his ability to pull together so many wildly unpredictable people, but also his, knack at being cold-blooded, with him shutting down a request by Billy Crystal, a dead-on Nicholas Badani, in a memorable scene. Also noteworthy are Cooper Hoffman as Dick Ebersol, one of the younger NBC execs, who has Michaels back to a point, but is also a more pragmatic team player. Then there's Tommy Dewey as the acid-tongued Michael O'Donoghue, who goes to war with NBC standards and practices. Matthew Rice is great as an increasingly furious George Carlin. Then there's Lamorne Morris as Garrett Morris, who struggles to find his place in a stacked cast, and Kim Matula as the even-tempered Jane Curtin. Succession's Nicholas Braun also shows up in dual roles, as both an uncanny Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson. For a movie that's so short, Saturday Night really has a lot to unpack in it, as there's just so much frenzied energy every split second of the film. It's somewhat stressful to watch, but then again, kind of that fact makes it the perfect big screen version of the show, doesn't it? And it's a movie I'm sure most SNL players, both past and present, will praise as being pretty accurate. And I have to say, it is one of Reitman's best movies, and I give it an 8 out of 10.